Madison Westbrook had always imagined that transferring to Clearwater Academy would mark a fresh beginning, but as she stood before its imposing limestone facade on that crisp October morning, anxiety churned in her stomach. The prestigious institution's towering columns and manicured lawns spoke of tradition and excellence, yet behind its polished exterior lay an ecosystem governed by unwritten rules that newcomers learned at their peril. At 17, Madison possessed a quiet demeanor that masked years of rigorous training under her late father's guidance. David Westbrook had been a renowned martial arts instructor who believed that true strength came not from aggression, but from discipline and restraint. His weathered training journal, which Madison now carried in her modest canvas backpack, contained not just techniques and strategies, but life lessons that had shaped her worldview. The Westbrook family's financial struggles had intensified after David's sudden passing 2 years prior. Madison's mother, Sarah, worked double shifts at a downtown medical clinic to keep their small apartment and fund Madison's education. The scholarship to Clearwater Academy represented hope for a better future, but Madison understood the weight of expectation that came with it. As she navigated the crowded hallways filled with designer clothing and expensive accessories, Madison felt the familiar sensation of being observed and judged. Students clustered around lockers adorned with photos and decorations, their conversations punctuated by laughter that seemed to exclude rather than include. The social hierarchy at Clearwater Academy was rigidly defined, with Jason Mitchell occupying its apex. The senior quarterback commanded attention wherever he went, his athletic achievements and family wealth providing him with an unassailable position. His inner circle included Chelsea Hartwell, whose platinum blonde hair and cutting remarks made her equally feared and admired. Supporting players like Marcus and Derek served as Jason's enforcers, their loyalty bought through reflected glory and social protection. Madison's first encounter with this group occurred during her second day as she attempted to locate her chemistry classroom. Jason's imposing frame blocked her path in the hallway, his arms crossed as he studied her with undisguised amusement. "Look what we have here," he announced loudly enough for nearby students to hear. "Fresh meat, trying to navigate our territory." Chelsea materialized beside him, her expertly applied makeup unable to disguise the coldness in her eyes. "That backpack looks like it survived a natural disaster. Did you fish it out of a donation bin?" The surrounding students tittered nervously, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge the established order. Madison kept her expression neutral, drawing upon years of her father's teaching about controlling emotional responses under pressure. "Excuse me," she said simply, stepping to the side to continue her journey. "Did we say you could leave?" Jason's voice carried a threatening edge that made several nearby students step back instinctively. Madison paused, meeting his gaze directly. In that moment, she conducted a quick, tactical assessment. Jason's center of gravity, his probable lack of formal training, the escape routes available in the crowded hallway. But her father's voice echoed in her memory. A true warrior seeks to de-escalate rather than dominate. "I'm just trying to get to class," she replied evenly before walking away, leaving Jason's crew momentarily stunned by her composure. The incident established Madison as a target of interest for the school's power brokers. Over the following days, she endured a steady stream of harassment disguised as harmless pranks. Her lunch tray would mysteriously spill, her locker would be jammed with paper, and whispered comments would follow her through the hallways. Madison found refuge in the school's extensive library, where she could lose herself in academic pursuits while maintaining emotional equilibrium. The head librarian, Mrs. Chen, seemed to recognize Madison's situation without requiring explanation, offering subtle support through understanding glances and strategic interventions when harassment grew too overt. The situation escalated during a particularly tense confrontation in the school's courtyard. Jason had cornered Madison near the fountain, his usual entourage forming a semicircle that blocked potential witnesses or intervention. "I don't think you understand how things work around here," Jason said, his voice low but menacing. "New students need to show proper respect to established residents." Chelsea stood nearby, her smartphone conspicuously positioned to record whatever unfolded. "This should be entertaining," she murmured to Marcus, who nodded eagerly. Madison remained calm, her breathing steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. She recognized the tactical disadvantage of her position, but refused to display fear that might encourage further aggression. "I haven't done anything to disrespect anyone," Madison replied quietly. "I'm just trying to attend classes and complete my education." Jason stepped closer, his physical presence clearly intended to intimidate. "Your attitude is the problem. You act like you're better than everyone else, walking around with that superior expression." The accusation was so fundamentally wrong that Madison almost laughed. Her quiet demeanor reflected years of training in emotional control, not arrogance or superiority. But explaining this would likely be interpreted as further provocation. When Jason suddenly grabbed Madison's wrist, attempting to demonstrate his physical dominance, muscle memory took over. Her father's training had ingrained certain responses so deeply that they bypassed conscious thought. Madison's free hand moved in a precise arc, applying pressure to a specific nerve cluster that caused Jason's grip to release immediately. The move was so quick and efficient that most observers missed its execution. They only saw Jason stumbling backward, shaking his hand, and staring at Madison with a mixture of surprise and rage. "You're going to regret that," he hissed, but his voice carried less conviction than before. Madison collected her backpack and walked away without responding, leaving the group to process what had just occurred. She knew this incident would have consequences, but her father's training had also taught her that some lines could not be crossed without response. News of the confrontation spread through Clearwater Academy with remarkable speed. Students who had previously ignored Madison now watched her with curiosity and speculation. The whispered conversations ranged from admiration to concern, with many wondering what other surprises the quiet transfer student might reveal. Madison's mother noticed the tension during their evening conversations, though Madison tried to shield her from the worst details. Sarah Westbrook had enough stress managing their financial situation without worrying about her daughter's social challenges. "How are you adjusting to the new school?" Sarah asked over their modest dinner of pasta and vegetables. "It's fine, Mom," Madison replied, technically truthful since she was managing the situation adequately. "I know this transition hasn't been easy, especially after everything we've been through," Sarah continued. "But this scholarship represents such an important opportunity for your future." Madison nodded, understanding the unspoken pressure to avoid anything that might jeopardize her academic standing. Her mother had sacrificed enormously to provide this chance, and Madison was determined not to waste it despite the social challenges. The harassment intensified over the following days, with Jason's group apparently interpreting Madison's defensive action as a challenge to their authority. Chelsea orchestrated a campaign of social isolation, convincing other students to avoid association with Madison through a combination of threats and social pressure. During lunch periods, Madison found herself eating alone, while conversations quieted whenever she approached. The loneliness was more difficult to endure than direct confrontation, as it attacked her sense of belonging and community. One afternoon, a younger student named Emma Rodriguez approached Madison in the library. The freshman appeared nervous but determined, clutching her textbooks like a shield. "I saw what happened in the courtyard," Emma whispered, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "That was really brave." Madison looked up from her homework, surprised by the unexpected contact. "I wasn't trying to be brave. I was just protecting myself." "Well, it was still impressive," Emma continued. "Most of us are too scared to stand up to Jason's group. They've been picking on freshmen since the beginning of the year." This revelation troubled Madison deeply. Her father had taught her that strength carried responsibility, particularly toward those unable to protect themselves. The idea that younger students were suffering while she focused solely on her own survival conflicted with her core values. "What kind of things do they do?" Madison asked quietly. Emma's expression darkened as she recounted incidents of verbal harassment, stolen assignments, and social humiliation that had become routine for students outside the approved social circles. The pattern revealed a systematic campaign of intimidation designed to maintain the existing power structure. Madison spent that evening reviewing her father's journal, searching for guidance on how to balance her promise to avoid trouble with her growing awareness of widespread injustice. One passage particularly resonated. "True strength is not measured by individual victories, but by our willingness to stand for those who cannot stand for themselves." The next day brought an escalation that forced Madison's hand. She witnessed Jason's group cornering Emma near the gymnasium, their voices carrying the familiar tone of mockery and threat. "Did you really think talking to the transfer freak would help your situation?" Chelsea was saying, her voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. "Now you've made things worse for yourself." Madison approached the group despite knowing the risks to her own position. "Leave her alone," she said firmly, positioning herself between the bullies and their target. Jason laughed, but the sound carried less confidence than before. "Look who's playing hero. Did you actually think that little trick in the courtyard made you tough?" "I think it proved I'm not an easy target," Madison replied calmly. "And neither is she, as long as I'm around." The statement was a clear line in the sand, transforming Madison from a defensive victim into an active protector. She could see the calculation in Jason's eyes as he weighed the potential consequences of escalating the situation. Chelsea stepped forward, her smartphone again positioned to record. "This is perfect. When she attacks Jason unprovoked, we'll have all the evidence we need to get her expelled." Madison recognized the trap being set, but refused to back down. Emma's safety was worth more than her own academic security, though she hoped to resolve the situation without violence. "I'm not going to attack anyone," Madison said clearly, "but I won't let you hurt her either." The standoff continued for several tense moments before a teacher's voice interrupted from across the courtyard. Jason's group dispersed quickly, unwilling to risk official attention to their activities. Emma looked up at Madison with gratitude and admiration. "Thank you. No one's ever stood up for me like that before." Madison helped Emma collect her scattered books. "Everyone deserves to feel safe at school. Don't let them convince you otherwise." Word of Madison's intervention spread even more rapidly than her initial confrontation with Jason. Students began looking at her differently, recognizing that she represented something more than just another transfer student trying to fit in. A small group of previously isolated students began gravitating toward Madison, finding strength in numbers and solidarity in shared experience. They formed an unofficial support network that challenged the school's traditional social hierarchy. Mrs. Chen observed these developments with interest, eventually approaching Madison during one of her library visits. "I've noticed some positive changes in the school's social dynamics recently," the librarian observed carefully. "Several students seem more confident and engaged than they were a few weeks ago." Madison looked up from her homework. "I think people just needed to know they weren't alone." "That's a mature perspective," Mrs. Chen replied. "I hope the administration recognizes the value of what you're doing here." The comment carried an implicit warning that Madison understood clearly. While her actions were morally justified, they also attracted attention that could be interpreted as troublemaking by school officials focused on maintaining order rather than justice. Madison's mother began noticing changes in her daughter's demeanor during their evening conversations. While Madison remained reluctant to discuss details, her increased confidence and sense of purpose were evident. "You seem different lately," Sarah observed. "More settled, somehow." "I think I'm finally finding my place at the school," Madison replied, which was true, even if her place wasn't what either of them had originally envisioned. The situation reached a crisis point during a confrontation in the school's empty gymnasium. Jason had requested a private meeting, ostensibly to negotiate a peaceful resolution to their ongoing conflict. Madison knew the invitation was likely a trap, but she also recognized that avoiding the confrontation would only delay the inevitable. She arrived at the specified time to find Jason waiting with his full support crew, their arrangement clearly planned to intimidate and overwhelm. "I'll give you one chance to apologize and disappear," Jason announced without preamble. "Transfer back to whatever public school you crawled out of, and we'll forget this whole thing happened." Madison remained calm, despite being outnumbered and isolated. "I'm not going anywhere. And I'm not apologizing for defending myself or protecting other students." Chelsea circled around behind Madison, her phone recording everything. "This is going to be so satisfying to watch." Jason moved forward aggressively, apparently convinced that his size and numbers advantage guaranteed victory. "Last chance, transfer girl. Walk away now, or we make you leave." When Jason lunged forward, attempting to grab Madison, years of training took over completely. She sidestepped his charge, redirected his momentum, and used his own weight against him. The larger boy found himself face down on the gymnasium floor before he fully understood what had happened. Marcus rushed to help his friend, only to discover that Madison's defensive skills extended beyond simple redirection. A precise application of pressure to his wrist caused him to release his grip instantly, leaving him shaking his hand and staring at Madison with new respect. Derek chose not to engage after witnessing his friend's defeats, apparently deciding that discretion represented the better part of valor in this particular situation. Chelsea continued recording, but her expression had shifted from anticipation to concern as she realized the narrative was not unfolding as expected. Madison stood over Jason's prone form, her breathing steady despite the physical exertion. "I told you I wasn't an easy target. Neither are the students you've been tormenting." She collected her backpack and walked toward the gymnasium exit, leaving Jason's group to process their first significant defeat at the hands of someone they had underestimated. The video Chelsea had recorded became the subject of intense scrutiny when it circulated among students and eventually reached the administration. The footage clearly showed Jason as the aggressor, with Madison responding defensively rather than initiating violence. Principal Harrison called Madison to his office the following morning, the recording displayed on his computer screen. The stern educator studied Madison carefully before speaking. "This is quite a remarkable piece of footage, Miss Westbrook. Can you explain how you acquired such impressive defensive skills?" Madison sat up straight, meeting his gaze directly. "My father was a martial arts instructor. He taught me self-defense techniques for personal protection." "I see," Principal Harrison replied thoughtfully. "And you used these techniques because Jason grabbed me first," Madison answered simply. "The video shows that clearly." The principal nodded slowly, reviewing the footage once more. "Indeed it does. However, I'm concerned about the potential for escalation in this situation." Madison understood the implicit warning. While she had acted within her rights, her actions had also disrupted the school's social equilibrium in ways that made administrators nervous. "I don't want any trouble, sir," Madison said honestly. "I just want to complete my education without being harassed or seeing other students victimized." Principal Harrison studied her for a long moment before responding. "I believe your intentions are good, Miss Westbrook. However, I hope you understand that our school's reputation depends on maintaining an environment of safety and respect for all students." The meeting ended with a formal warning about the consequences of future incidents, though Madison sensed that the principal's concerns were directed as much toward Jason's group as toward her own actions. The aftermath of the gymnasium confrontation brought unexpected changes to Clearwater Academy's social landscape. Students who had previously accepted harassment as inevitable began showing more confidence in their daily interactions. Emma Rodriguez approached Madison after classes, accompanied by several other younger students. "We've been talking," Emma said nervously, "and we were wondering if you might be willing to teach us some of what your father taught you." Madison considered the request carefully. Teaching self-defense skills could be interpreted as preparing for violence, but it could also empower students to protect themselves against genuine threats. "Self-defense isn't about fighting," Madison explained carefully. "It's about awareness, de-escalation, and only using physical techniques when absolutely necessary." The group nodded eagerly, clearly desperate for any tools that might help them navigate their school environment more safely. Madison began holding informal sessions in the school's unused wrestling room, teaching basic awareness techniques and simple defensive moves. The group grew steadily as word spread among students who had felt powerless in the face of systematic intimidation. Mrs. Chen provided quiet support for these activities, ensuring that the room remained available and that the sessions operated within school guidelines. The librarian understood that Madison was providing something the official administration could not or would not address. Jason's group found their influence significantly diminished following the gymnasium incident. Students no longer automatically deferred to their authority, and several previously loyal supporters began distancing themselves from the more aggressive tactics. Chelsea attempted to maintain her social position through increasingly desperate measures, but her credibility suffered when students realized that her recorded evidence had actually vindicated Madison rather than condemning her. Madison's mother eventually learned about the self-defense sessions during a parent-teacher conference, though Mrs. Chen presented them in the most positive light possible. "Your daughter has shown remarkable leadership in helping other students develop confidence and conflict resolution skills," the librarian explained diplomatically. Sarah Westbrook felt pride and concern in equal measure. She was proud of Madison's character and courage, but worried about the potential consequences of such high-profile activities. "I hope she's being careful not to jeopardize her scholarship opportunities," Sarah said quietly. "I believe Madison understands the importance of maintaining her academic standing," Mrs. Chen reassured her. "She's found a way to help others while staying within appropriate boundaries." The school year progressed with a gradually shifting dynamic that favored cooperation over domination. Students who had previously felt isolated began forming supportive relationships that transcended traditional social barriers. Madison continued her academic excellence while maintaining her informal leadership role among the school's more vulnerable population. Her father's journal remained her constant companion, providing guidance for navigating increasingly complex social and ethical challenges. During the spring semester, Clearwater Academy experienced an unprecedented incident that tested everyone's commitments to their stated values. A new student arrived with an even more troubled background than Madison's, facing immediate harassment from students who had learned nothing from the previous semester's events. Madison found herself in the position of having to decide whether to intervene on behalf of someone she barely knew, potentially risking the stability she had worked so hard to establish. The answer came naturally when she recalled her father's most important lesson. Strength that serves only itself is not true strength at all. She approached the new student during lunch, offering the same kind of support that Emma Rodriguez had initially sought from her. "This school can be challenging for new students," Madison said simply, "but you don't have to face it alone." The gesture created a ripple effect that eventually reached the administration's attention. Principal Harrison called Madison to his office once again, but this time his demeanor was notably different. "Miss Westbrook," he began, "I've been observing the changes in our school's social environment over the past several months. While I was initially concerned about potential disruptions, I must admit that the overall effect has been remarkably positive." Madison waited for him to continue, unsure whether this was leading toward praise or punishment. "I'm wondering if you might be interested in formalizing some of your activities through our student leadership program," the principal continued. "We're looking for students who can help create a more inclusive and supportive environment for all our community members." The offer represented recognition of Madison's positive impact, while providing official sanction for activities that had previously operated in a gray area. It also demonstrated the administration's willingness to acknowledge that the previous social order had been problematic. Madison accepted the position with the understanding that her role would be to help establish systems and policies that protected vulnerable students rather than simply responding to crises after they occurred. Over the remaining months of the school year, Madison worked with administrators, teachers, and fellow students to develop comprehensive anti-bullying initiatives that addressed both the symptoms and underlying causes of harassment. Her father's journal provided the philosophical foundation for these efforts, with its emphasis on strength as protection rather than domination. The programs they developed focused on building community rather than simply punishing misconduct. Jason Martinez eventually transferred to a different school, apparently unable to adapt to the new social environment where his previous tactics no longer generated fear or respect. His departure removed a significant source of tension and allowed for further positive changes. Chelsea Hartwell remained at Clearwater Academy but adopted a much lower profile, apparently recognizing that her previous behavior had damaged her reputation beyond repair. She focused on academic achievement rather than social manipulation for her remaining time at the school. Emma Rodriguez emerged as one of Madison's most effective assistants in the student leadership program. Her own transformation from victim to advocate, inspiring other students to believe in the possibility of positive change. Mrs. Chen continued providing behind-the-scenes support for these initiatives, her library becoming an official meeting space for student leadership activities and conflict resolution sessions. As Madison's senior year concluded, she reflected on how dramatically her expectations for the Clearwater Academy experience had evolved. What had begun as a simple desire to complete her education quietly had transformed into a comprehensive effort to improve conditions for all students. During the graduation ceremony, Principal Harrison specifically recognized Madison's contributions to improving the school's social climate. The acknowledgement represented not just personal achievement, but validation of the principles her father had taught her about using strength to protect others. Madison's mother watched from the audience with tears of pride, understanding finally how her daughter had channeled grief and challenge into positive action that would benefit future students for years to come. The scholarship Madison had worked so hard to maintain ultimately led to acceptance at several prestigious universities, where she planned to study education and continued developing programs that supported vulnerable youth populations. As she prepared to leave Clearwater Academy, Madison organized the student leadership program to continue operating effectively without her direct involvement. Emma Rodriguez and several other students were prepared to maintain the initiatives they had developed together. Madison's father's journal would accompany her to college, continuing to provide guidance as she faced new challenges and opportunities. The lessons about strength, protection, and community service remained as relevant in higher education as they had been in high school. On her final day at Clearwater Academy, Madison visited the library where Mrs. Chen was preparing for the next academic year. "I hope you know how much your support meant to me," Madison said quietly. "You did all the hard work," Mrs. Chen replied with a smile. "I just made sure you had a safe space to figure things out." Madison walked through the hallways one last time, noting how different they felt from her first anxious journey through them. Students walked with more confidence, conversations seemed more inclusive, and the atmosphere carried less tension than she remembered from her early days. The transformation hadn't been complete or universal, but it represented genuine progress toward a more just and supportive community. Madison understood that such changes required constant maintenance and renewal, but she was confident that the systems they had established would provide a foundation for continued improvement. As she left Clearwater Academy's limestone facade behind, Madison carried with her not just academic achievements and university acceptance letters, but the knowledge that individual courage could create positive change even in seemingly intractable situations. Her father's legacy lived on not just in her personal strength and character, but in the community of empowered students she was leaving behind to continue the work of building a better, more inclusive environment for everyone.